This election year has found people on both sides of the aisle frustrated with problems that still face our country today. Joining me now is Jim Stone, and he earned a PhD in economics at Harvard, and for 4 years he was the chairman and commissioner of the U.S. Commodities Futures Trading Commission. Jim's current book is this: 5 Easy Theses, Commonsense Solutions to America's Greatest Economic Challenges. Good morning to you, Jim.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely. You know, I think people are already frustrated with the political landscape going on. You know, we get a little exhausted early on. This book that you wrote, talk a little bit about your background and what led you to write a book about these problems.
Yeah, sure. I'm in my third career. I was first an academic, and then I was in government, and for the last 30 years or so I've been in business. Started a small insurance company that's turned into a pretty large one. And I've thought about these issues all along, and I've had what I felt was unfinished business from my time in government and politics. And then I was lucky that my wife and I have 2 children who went off to college, and as empty nesters, we had a little extra time, so I had time to write about what I'd been thinking about for years. It's time to the election cycle, but these are the issues you're not likely to hear about much during the election debate.
And these are 5, yes, and these are 5 of what you feel are the most pressing economic issues. They are fiscal balance, inequality, healthcare, education, and the financial sector reform. If these are our biggest 5 issues, why do you think they are not being addressed by our political leaders?
Well, because they are so big. You know, as I was trying to choose a title for the book, an alternative title I thought about was Too Big to Touch. These are issues that don't lend themselves to sound bites, and they don't lend themselves to quick fixes. They're not the kind of things that politicians want to talk about. What they require is a reset of the public's thinking about these issues. And that takes time and reasoning, so they don't fit very well in an election cycle. But they are the important ones, and they're the ones the country has to be solved. We're not a country in decline, but we have these problems. We have to solve them.
You know, a lot of people, especially here in Wisconsin, we care a lot about education for our children. That's one of the topics in your book. Kindergarten is something that comes up, and if it's mandatory in your state. I didn't realize that some states do not have mandatory kindergarten.
Yeah. I don't try to follow all 50 states, but I think in general, preschool education is not required in the country. That's one of the things, you know, I have sort of what I consider a short-term program of 8 points, and then a long-term program which involves universal national service that I've recommended in the book to solve our education issues. Preschool is one of the 8 points in the short-term solution.
Mm-hmm. You also talk about school days for kids being 2 hours longer. And, you know, oftentimes we think about school starting so early that people want to talk about pushing that time back. But increasing the hours of school, how do you see that as being beneficial?
Yeah, well, I'm actually not a fan of very early hours for kids, but I do think that the school day should be longer. That's another one of those things that are incremental changes that we could bring about. But let me back up for a minute, if I may, and just say that our education system just isn't working well for the roughly 70% of kids who are going to go from high school to work rather than graduate from college somewhere. And for the ones that do graduate from college, it's not working very well either, because college costs are getting overwhelming. So unless you're super talented or super rich, the system's not working right for you. We need to fix it.
I think a lot of people would agree with you on that. And one of the other topics of the 5 is the financial sector reform. And you say this is a very personal issue to you. Why is that?
Yes. Well, because I was a financial regulator in Washington, and I tried very hard to convince people back then that there was too much leverage, too much risk, too much concentration in our financial system, and that we needed to downsize it rather than see it increased. I don't think I convinced anyone. I can't name anyone in Congress that I was able to convince. And so I've wanted to try to make that case again ever since. And 2008 gave me the proof that I needed. I didn't have it before that. But 2008's the cost of allowing too much leverage and not enough disclosure.
You know, it was a great conversation with you. I'm sorry we ran out of time, but I do want everybody to get a copy of your book, because one of the things you focus on is that outside of just casting our vote, there's things that we can do to bring about necessary policy changes that are within our individual power. You can learn more about them by getting Jim Stone's book. It's at 5easytheses.com. Thanks so much for joining us on The Morning Blend, Jim. We really appreciate it.
Oh, I appreciate your asking me. Thanks.